Quebec is a unique place. It's a vast, densely populated French-speaking province within a much larger, predominantly English-speaking country. The people of the province are amongst the first Europeans to arrive in North America. It's a province which voted not once, but twice on whether it should leave Canada, and both times it narrowly failed. Its vast territory occupied by a large variety of societies from several diverse nations banded together in the Haudenosaunee, called by the French the Iroquois Confederacy in the south, to Inuit people living in Quebec's frozen north. At least 10 indigenous nations that we know about lived in this region. Now, let's talk about the first Europeans to arrive in Quebec. Sometime shortly after the first voyage of Christopher Columbus down in the Caribbean, a French sailor brought back several captured indigenous people, indicating that there was land in the northern Atlantic. A French explorer named Jacques Cartier took up this interest. Trust me, this is important. There's 1,000 streets and buildings named after him in Quebec. On June 24th of 1534, he and his crew landed in the modern-day Gaspé Peninsula, and in a very European fashion, claimed the entirety of other people's territory as the property of the King of France. Smelling profit, King Francois gave a French noble named, Jean-François de la Roque de la Roberval the task of setting up a colony in these lands he called New France. He failed at the job, and it wouldn't be until the year 1608 Quebec City would be founded by Samuel de Champlain, another person many things are named after in Quebec. It was the first attempt to make a permanent settlement. Called the 7 Years' War, or French and Indian War to the Americans, would feature several significant battles in Quebec. With control of the Atlantic, the British were able to overpower the French in North America. The British then proceeded to occupy New France, and the people living there would never be part of the French Empire again. The war ended with the Treaty of Paris, which ceded all of Canada to the British, and King George III set out to put a government there. This is a significant event in Quebecois history, especially to Quebec nationalists. To them, the Plains of Abraham was when they lost everything, and their oppression by the English began. The British would rule over Quebec for the next century. The Quebecois didn't seem to mind a whole lot as long as they were allowed to speak French and practice Catholicism. They also, to this day, were allowed to keep the French legal system. It was the first time any territory other than Quebec City got the name Quebec. All of this formalized in a document in 1774 called the Quebec Act. Within it, a nationalist liberal political party called the Parti Canadien led rebellions in 1837 and 1838. The uprising was driven by an extreme group of them known as the Parti Patriote. They didn't succeed in much but the imposition of martial law in 1840. It resulted in a lot of reforms and tighter control by the English colonial administration. This was also a period when many new immigrants from the British Isles began to arrive in Quebec, creating a sizable Anglophone minority that exists to this day. Then we get to the big year, 1867. After some negotiation, the colonial provinces of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Canada joined into a new country called the Dominion of Canada. This was when Quebec finally got the name of Quebec. Canada was now a country. Kinda. It took care of its own affairs, but foreign policy was still under the control of the United Kingdom. Quebec, the Canadian province, was dominated mainly by the church. Most hospitals, charities, and French-language schools were run by it. Canada and Quebec also took a hard hit from the Great Depression. Quebec saw a massive move to reactionary politics. Quebecois people doubled down on their loyalty to the church, and Quebec nationalism became a traditionalist movement trying to keep the old ways against a changing world. The people of Quebec elected a man named Maurice Duplessis for 15 years, who deepened church and state relations and fought with unions and intellectuals. Because of his doubling down on traditionalist values, Quebec was insular, abortion was illegal, and divorce would be outlawed until 1968. However, baby boomer Quebecois would fight this. During the 1960s, Quebec went through something called the Quiet Revolution. During this period of reform, Quebec secularized, liberalized, and tied these changes to a new Quebec identity. The province signed an international agreement with Paris, and the Quebecois people protested a visit from the Queen. And of course, with a spike in nationalism, we get a spike in violence. Nationalism, however, was still on the rise. A new Minister of Culture was founded with the goal of preserving French culture. In 1968, the nationalist Parti Québécois was elected and still exists to this day. Support for more nationalism and separatist ideas circulated throughout the late 60s and 70s, resulting in a failed referendum on separation in 1980. In the early 80s, Canada brought home and ratified its own constitution. All 9 provinces, except for Quebec, signed it. In 1995, there was a second referendum, and it only failed by the slimmest of margins. In more recent times, Quebec has lost a lot of its support for separation. The federal government passed a motion declaring the Québécois the status of a nation within Canada. The Liberal government in Quebec tried to raise tuition on universities, which resulted in massive protests under something called the Red Square movement. It led to the separatist Parti Québécois getting elected, with the province's first female premier, Pauline Marois. I gotta put my cards on the table, I wasn't a fan. What with the trying to choke my small English university out of existence through austerity, and blatantly racist Islamophobic laws, but whatever. Her government only lasted a couple years anyway. And so yeah, we come to today. Quebec is having issues dealing with a rise in far-right groups, especially those of the neo-Nazi and Islamophobic variety. A white supremacist committed a mass shooting of a mosque in 2017, and Quebec goes to the polls this year with an expected wave of right-wing support. But yeah, for all it is, Quebec is a fantastic part of Canada. Its unique culture and place in the country is core to what Canada is, and so I wanted to tell their story.